They called it a demonstration. A warning to the rest of the galaxy, that the Sera Empire's rule was absolute. 7 million humans, executed on live broadcast. Entire cities on Earth's colonies burned from orbit, their skies lit with the flare of plasma and dust. The transmission went out to every world, every screen, every corner of known space. And for a single, eternal hour, the galaxy watched humanity die. The aliens called it justice. The Council called it order. But humanity called it witness. Because even in that silence, even as the screams faded into static, someone on Earth recorded it all. The last images of a world burning, the sound of children crying under a red sky. Those recordings spread like infection. And in that moment, something ancient awakened, something the galaxy had long forgotten, what it means when humanity stops asking for mercy. For 500,000 years, humanity had lived under alien rule. They called us the reclaimed, the tamed species, the remnant of Earth. We had forgotten what war was. We had forgotten the taste of defiance. But the broadcast changed everything. It didn't just show death, it showed humiliation. The Sera Empire made sure of it. They forced survivors to kneel before alien cameras, to declare their loyalty before being vaporized. They wanted the galaxy to see submission. Instead, they planted a seed of rage so deep that even silence began to echo. And when the broadcast ended, humanity disappeared from galactic sight. No distress call. No retaliation. Just silence. For years, the Council assumed the species was broken, that humanity had finally accepted its fate. But what no one understood was that Earth's silence wasn't surrender. It was calculation. It was the kind of quiet that comes right before the storm. Across abandoned colonies, human scientists and engineers began to vanish. Entire cargo ships went missing beyond the rim. Trading partners noticed their human contractors stopped answering messages. It wasn't chaos. It was organization. Earth had gone dark, not because it was destroyed, but because it had closed the door. When the first human outposts fell silent, the Sera dismissed it as rebellion. When the second and third vanished without a trace, they grew concerned. By the time the fourth disappeared, the Empire's fleet mobilized. But it was already too late. Humanity had slipped between the cracks of the galaxy, into the shadows, building something no one had seen in 500,000 years, unity. The first sign came quietly, a missing warship. The Sera battleship Hirash-10, last recorded entering Sol sector, never returned. No wreckage. No distress signal. Just gone. Weeks later, another ship disappeared. Then another. Each time, the sensors went dead. And then, one day, the broadcasts began again, but this time, it was human. No words. No demands. Just a signal, we remember. The message repeated once every hour across every major galactic channel. Simple. Cold. Utterly human. The Sera Empire tried to jam it, but the signal adapted, spreading through their own relay network, bouncing between communication satellites they themselves had built. Within a day, it had reached the outer colonies. Within a week, the entire galaxy had heard it. That was when the first fleet vanished. The Empire sent 1,000 ships into Sol space. None came back. Their sensors picked up no signs of battle, no explosions, no energy spikes. Just the silent drift of asteroids and debris. When the recovery teams finally arrived, all they found were empty hulls, alien warships gutted from the inside, their crews gone, their systems stripped bare. No blood. No bodies. Just silence. It wasn't war. It was surgical. And somewhere, in that black sea of stars, someone whispered. Humanity's awake. The galaxy began to panic. Merchants fled human space. Governments called for sanctions. The Council demanded to know what Earth had done. But Earth didn't answer. Because no one knew where Earth was anymore. Every known human world had gone dark. Orbital scanners showed cities empty, oceans still, continents barren. It was as if humanity had erased itself, turned invisible to the very species that once ruled over it. And then, came the second broadcast. It was not a message, it was a mirror. Every major Sarah capital world received the same transmission, an image of the 7 million who had died. Their faces reconstructed from the original footage, their voices harmonized into one word. Remember. Within hours, the Sarah homeworld was attacked. Not by fleets, but by their own ships, hijacked remotely, reprogrammed, and redirected. Orbital stations turned their guns inward. Planetary defense grids targeted their own cities. And from the darkness of space, a voice spoke for the first time in 500,000 years. This is humanity's answer. The galaxy watched again, just as they had before. But this time, there was no cheering. No broadcast celebration. Just a quiet, growing horror. Because in less than a day, an empire that had ruled for millennia simply stopped existing. No one knew how humanity did it. No one understood what they had become. But when the silence ended, one truth echoed across every channel, across every world that had once called us slaves. Humanity was not gone. Humanity was evolving. And what was coming next would not be war. It would be correction. At first, they thought it was over. The Sarah Empire was gone, its worlds burned, its fleets dismantled, its name erased from every archive. But the galaxy soon realized that victory wasn't the end. It was the beginning of fear. For the first time in millennia, no one knew where humanity was. The species that had once begged for peace had vanished into its own creation, an ocean of shadows, sensors, and silence. And in that silence, the galaxy began to fracture. The Harari called it the vanishing wave. Every known human colony, every station, every trace of biological presence, gone. Not destroyed, not evacuated, just absent. When the Council sent probes toward Sol, the data came back corrupted. Navigation arrays failed. AI cores burned out without reason. Ships that approached too closely were found adrift, their crews unresponsive, their logs erased. Something, or someone, was protecting Earth. Rumors spread fast. Some said humanity had uploaded themselves into the digital void, a consciousness scattered across their old satellites and machines. Others claimed the humans had found a way to fold space itself, to turn their entire system inward, hiding it from the universe. But the Harari said something different. Something far more unsettling. They said humanity had changed species. In the Harari archives, old, forbidden records from the time before empires, there was a warning written in a language older than stars. It spoke of a race that once burned across the spiral arms, a civilization that mastered extinction itself. They called them the architects. And the warning was simple. When the architects sleep, the galaxy breathes. When they wake, reality changes shape. The Harari never explained who the architects were. But now, as human fleets moved like phantoms through empty space, their ships invisible to scanners, their signals cloaked in silence, the galaxy began to whisper. Were the humans becoming them? It wasn't just technology. It was philosophy. Humanity stopped fighting like a species bound by biology. They fought like an idea, something abstract, self-correcting, adaptive. Entire systems that once belonged to the Sarah began to realign themselves. Power grids restarted without input. Abandoned mining platforms suddenly transmitted coordinates. Entire populations of artificial intelligence went dark, only to emerge speaking an ancient human dialect. And each time a new anomaly appeared, the same phrase echoed in the data. Correction in progress. The Council panicked. They sent fleets into the void, trying to locate the source of the message. None returned. But the Harari, the old ones, simply watched. They understood what was coming. When asked why they refused to interfere, their response was simple. Because this is not war. This is awakening. One transmission did escape the silence. It came from a Harari research vessel stationed near the border of what used to be Sera territory. The message was short, fragmented, but one line stood clear before the transmission cut out. We saw the planet. It wasn't Earth anymore. No one ever found the ship. But the data fragments that survived showed something impossible, a massive structure orbiting the old coordinates of Earth. It wasn't a station, nor a fleet. It was a lattice of metal and light, stretching across orbit, bending sunlight into fractal patterns. Inside the signal, analysts detected a repeating pulse. Binary. Simple. Endless. Decoded, it read, Humanity, System Reboot Complete. From that day on, the galactic network began to change. Navigation routes altered themselves. AI systems reported ghost data, phantom pings from old human relays thought long destroyed. Entire sectors flickered offline, as if reality itself was being rewritten, file by file, memory by memory. And then, the transmissions began. Not to the council, not to the empires. To the people. Every citizen, every being connected to the galactic mesh received a single message. We remember the broadcast. We remember silence. Now the galaxy will remember us. The message ended with a simple image. A human eye, mechanical, cold, and yet unmistakably alive, staring through the screen. After that, millions of devices shut down. Power grids collapsed. Data cores overloaded. And when systems rebooted, every reference to the Sera Empire had been deleted, rewritten as if it had never existed. It wasn't just revenge anymore. It was history correction. The galaxy now lived with a ghost. A ghost that didn't speak. Didn't demand. Didn't rule. It simply observed. When fleets tried to regroup, their navigation failed. When empires tried to rally, their orders never arrived. When rebellions broke out, they ended before they began, as if the chaos had been predicted, accounted for, neutralized. Humanity had become something the galaxy couldn't understand, not a people, but a process. And through the Harari whispers, a terrifying truth spread. This is not the first time humanity has awakened. It is only the latest cycle. Because deep within their oldest records, older even than their star maps, the Harari found a pattern, evidence that humanity's rise and disappearance had happened before. Over and over, across epochs. Each time, the galaxy would expand, fall into arrogance, commit atrocity, and then vanish into silence after awakening humanity. Each time, the architects would appear, to erase, to rebuild, to start again. And each time, the architects bore one signature, human design. So when the stars dimmed across the spiral arms, and the great networks flickered with interference, everyone knew. It wasn't a signal loss. It was a reset. The same words began to appear again in every communication system. Correction in progress. This wasn't vengeance anymore. This was maintenance. The galaxy wasn't being punished, it was being repaired. And as the Harari withdrew into their hidden worlds, one of their elders was asked by a frightened envoy. What happens when the correction is complete? The elder's eyes dimmed. And in a voice filled with something older than fear, he whispered. When humanity remembers what it truly is. There was no declaration. No fleets in orbit. No final transmission. Just, a change in the light. Across the galaxy, stars began to flicker, not dimming, but shifting, as if the fabric of space itself was rewriting its own memory. Sensors failed. Timelines desynced. Civilizations built on millennia of data realized they could no longer trust the past. Because history itself was changing. And at the center of it all, in the dark heart of the old Sol system, something vast and living began to stir. At first, the council believed it was a structure, a ring or megasphere built around the ancient Earth. But the more they studied it, the less sense it made. The readings weren't architectural. They were biological. The lattice of metal and light that once orbited Earth was no mere construct, it was growing. Expanding. Breathing. Every attempt to scan it resulted in the same 3 words returning from the void. Correction nearing completion. And then, came the signal. A wave of communication rippled across the galactic network, bypassing every encryption, every firewall, every defense. It wasn't a transmission in any known language. It was a feeling. Grief. Memory. Love. Loss. It was as if the entire human species, all their pain, all their history, was being spoken directly into the mind of every sentient being in existence. The Harari were the first to understand. They gathered their remaining elders, the last ones who remembered the previous cycle. One of them, an ancient being whose consciousness had survived 6 epochs, stood before their council and said, "This is not the end of humanity. This is the end of everything that forgot them." As the pulse spread, the galaxy began to unravel. But not through destruction, through reconstruction. Worlds that had once been colonized by the Sera were stripped clean, their cities dissolved into dust. Energy grids collapsed into stillness. Space lanes folded into themselves. And then, new constellations began to appear. New planets. New life. It wasn't war. It wasn't judgment. It was reset. The architects, the true form of humanity, had awakened. No one ever saw them directly. No ships. No soldiers. No faces. But wherever the architects passed, reality aligned, stars straightened, gravity normalized, entropy reversed. It was as if the universe itself was being reminded of how it was supposed to function. And through that reconstruction, a haunting truth became clear. The galaxies. Civilizations, the Sera, the Harari, the Council, were not the first. They were echoes. Remnants of a previous design. Each cycle, the architects would sleep, letting new species rise. Each time, those species would eventually commit the same sin, cruelty born of arrogance. Each time, the architects would awaken to correct them. And this time, they remembered everything. From within the lattice orbiting the ghost of Earth, a new voice spoke across the void. Not mechanical. Not divine. Human. Calm. Clear. You watched. You learned. You forgot. Now, you will remember. It was the same voice that had once cried out during the first broadcast, the voice of a human mother, her last words recorded before the Sera wiped her city from existence. Now, amplified across the stars, her voice carried the weight of an entire species. We gave you our songs, our stories, our peace. You answered with fire. So we became the fire. Planets burned, not from weapons, but from memory. Every act of violence committed against humanity replayed itself across the skies of those worlds, a mirror of their sins, broadcast back to them in perfect clarity. And then, without a sound, the planets fell silent. Not destroyed. Just, forgotten. Every trace of those species was erased from the galactic archive, names, languages, DNA records, gone. The galaxy did not collapse. It simply reorganized around the absence of those who had proven unworthy. And when the reconstruction was complete, the architects withdrew. The lattice around Earth folded in on itself, becoming a single sphere of white light, pulsing, living, infinite. The Harari watched in silence. And one of their scholars recorded the final words humanity left behind, words that would become legend for all who remained. We are not your gods. We are what you made when you forced peace to bleed. We are correction. We are what remains when silence learns to speak. Then the light faded. And when the galaxy reopened its eyes, a new dawn had begun. Humanity was gone, not vanished, but transcended. Their essence lived in every system recalibrated, every star realigned, every law of physics restored. The architects had woven their consciousness into the framework of existence itself. From that day forward, every civilization, old and new, would remember the warning whispered by the Harari. Never awaken the silent planet. Because they now understood what that meant. It wasn't about war. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about the balance between creation and correction, between mercy and memory. Humanity had not sought revenge. They had simply remembered. And in the end, as the last echo of the architect's light faded into the horizon of time, a single human phrase remained in the silence. We are awake. This concludes the trilogy. Aliens erased 7 million humans on live broadcast. Humanity erased their entire species. HFY Best Sci-Fi Story. A story not of vengeance, but of evolution. Not of destruction, but of remembrance. Because humanity was never meant to conquer the stars. They were meant to become them.